Hello everyone, I appreciate you watching my channel. I was making the video on sewing machine foot pedals, and I originally had all of my pedals laid out and I was going to make one video, and of course I don't script these videos. I take what I know and I just want to talk naturally about them, and there are many times when I realize that, oh, I'm going to need to do more than one video. And so instead of giving you a really long video on all foot pedals, I thought, why don't I break this into the three basic types? And so the last video was on rheostats, and this next video I'm going to do is going to be on the button style foot pedal that was used by Singer. Now the Necki company, I believe they may have copied Singer because they did something similar to this, but the vast majority of these, almost all of the foot pedals you ever see that look like this, these pedals were designed and used by the Singer company for many decades. More than a half century. They were created in the 1930s, and I'm going to go over the construction of these, how they work, and why they might be useful for you. And the the company, back in the day when Singer was making sewing machines, they also made a lot of the components that went into their machines. I believe they may have actually built their own foot pedals. It's entirely possible. Now in the last video I briefly mentioned to you that these pedals, you may buy a vintage Singer and you may think you don't have a foot pedal or one's missing, and all you see is a little metal lever like on this old white. This is a white knee control power source. It's a little box, but you can't use it with your foot. But it'll have a steel metal lever. It looks like an old shoehorn. And sometimes you'll see that in a Singer sewing machine, and you won't see a pedal. And you might think, gosh, I'm going to have to get a pedal for this thing. And I've actually had people sell me Singer machines and tell me ahead of time, sorry, I don't have a pedal. You'll have to get one. And then I get there and I open up the table and I point it out to them and I say, oh no, you've got a pedal. But the pedal is resting inside the table. Usually inside the Singer table is a bracket. And the bracket is bolted to the table, and then the foot pedal will slide, and it goes in just one direction. And you'll know because the button always goes on the end where the lever is, if it has a knee lever. Which it would have if it has a bracket for this thing, and it slides down into the bracket and rests in it. It clicks in place and stays there. Some of these things have been there since the machine was sold new, and it may have dust on it and what have you. And if it's been sitting there a long time, you may have to use some elbow grease to get it out, but they will come out and they slide up and out. Be careful when you do that because, of course, there's going to be a cord attached to it, and you want to be gentle with cords that are as old as some of these are. Now, I mentioned to you when I was talking about rheostats, foot pedals, which Singer also did make some of those, but this was their bread and butter. This was the most common foot pedal they used in the vintage era. And I mentioned to you that one of the things you should never do with a foot pedal is to drop it. And the same thing applies to these Singer button foot pedals. Again, you put your foot on these, and unlike the, what did I do with my, I'm going to show you the rheostat, because many of you who have vintage machines will see this. With the rheostat, just as with many modern electronic pedals, if my hand was a foot, you press your foot like an accelerator in a car, and as you do, the more you press, the faster the machine goes, because you're letting more current into your machine. With the Singer button style, it's different. And some people will get this and think there's something wrong with it, it's not working, because they keep trying to apply their foot as they would with the other types. But Singer designed this pedal to be ergonomically friendly. You rest the outer portion of your foot, pretend my hand is a foot, and you rest it on the right little post here, if you will, and then you take the ball of your foot, make believe for a moment, and you roll it. And as you roll it, you apply pressure to the button. And that's how it was used. Some people prefer to use it in a knee lever situation, and other people don't. And you may have your own personal favorites, but many people misunderstand this pedal, and it's unfortunate. Now, I'm going to turn it upside down, and over here behind it, if you all saw my video on what do you do when you get a sewing machine and something's wrong with it, I showed you this pedal. This is the pedal from the Singer 301 that I got, and it was the owner demonstrated it for me, and of course I got it home and realized that when you press on the button, it's broken. And I'm going to talk to you about, I'll do a separate video on how to service one of these. That's not the point of this, but I kind of want to show you what these are and how they differ from the rheostats. So let's open this one up. This is the good one. Now notice, if you look at the bottom of this, I say good one, I haven't serviced this one yet, but it's certainly in better shape than the one that I bought that turned out to be cracked on the bottom that you see right behind. And again, just like with anything else, when you first put your screwdriver down onto the screw, turn gently, don't go crazy, don't use a drill, because these screws are screwed into Bakelite. Bakelite plastic. It's one of the first plastics ever invented for commercial use. And as I mentioned on the one that was broken, it was actually missing one of those screws. But I have extras, and you can buy reproductions. That's how many of these pedals were made back in the day. It's hard to believe you can get reproductions for some of these things. I was really surprised, but pleasantly surprised that I could if I couldn't get a spare vintage one. Okay, so I'm going to pull these screws out now that I've loosened them, and that's what they look like. They're specific to this. And if they stick, they might have a little, they should not have sewing machine oil on them, but you never know. And what they are holding up against the base, they hold the base to the shell, the top shell of the foot pedal, but they also hold in place little rubber feet. Now, these rubber feet were designed to have a lot of grip, and they do. They work really well. But as you know, plastic and rubber doesn't last forever, just as with electrical cords, little rubber feet dry rot. Now these may have been replaced at some point. They look pretty good. If not, they were very well preserved. I've seen them before where they literally crumble when you touch them. Now, these screws, I'll get the other two out here, and don't worry if it fights with you. Sometimes these screws are, they're tired. They need a little encouragement to come out, but you can do it. Now, let's turn around. And you'll see there's a cord relief, which is actually needs to be further in. It's actually not where it needs to be. But this little space here, where you see this little, you'll see like a little flange, that's where we're going to go to get the base of our pedal to come up. And I'm just going to turn it, and because I don't really want to pull on my cord. And I'm going to lift out like that. And I see what I am typically used to seeing. There's like a little tiny ball of dust. I don't know where that came from. Who knows? This thing may not have ever been opened since it was made. I'm not kidding. Now this was still being used. This was used on like an early 60s Singer machine. They were still using this foot pedal, although their plug end had changed. It was more like the plug that you would see on a Singer 500 Slant-O-Matic, probably late 50s, early 60s. Now, let's take a look at this, and I'll show you why it is different. This is it is an analog or electromechanical pedal, just like the rheostats are, but it's different. This is called a carbon pile foot pedal. It uses a pile of carbon discs inside a porcelain housing, just like you remember the big block of porcelain that you saw on the rheostat foot pedal. Well, we still have porcelain here, and now you can see again why it's so important not to drop these. You don't want to drop them. With the rheostats, you can damage the coils and or the porcelain. With these, you can damage the porcelain or the little discs that are inside. Now, remember when I was pushing on the button? When you push on that button, it pushes here on this little linkage that pulls. I'm going to show this to you. Now watch. Pretend my thumb is really the foot on top of the button. The button, where are you, button? The button is right above where I'm putting my thumb. So when you push down on the button, that's what happens. Now watch what happens when I push. Notice it brings, that metal clip gets closer and closer and closer to copper, these little copper, they're like flanges that stick out from the porcelain, okay? Now, when that makes contact, your machine is working. It starts to work very slowly here, but then finally when you get full contact, that's full speed on the Singer. Now I'm going to show you what carbon discs look like. This is not something that you really should ever have to see when you're using your machine. Okay, these came from an old foot pedal that I had to salvage. I couldn't save it because it had been broken, it had been dropped. And I want you to see these. These are carbon discs. And look, guys, look, they're very lightweight. Okay, they feel like graphite. That doesn't mean they are graphite, but notice that one of these is broken. Okay, they're like little wafers of carbon, and some of them have black sooted carbon built up on them. At the top of that carbon stack is a contact point like this, and this contact point is what a metal butterfly spring is going to make contact here. And what happens with carbon pile, the way these work is when you are sewing flat out and you have that button all the way, you have it pressed all the way flat, what you have done is you've essentially taken this pile of carbon discs, and I'm gonna try to approximate this with my hands. It's not easy here, but bear with me. So imagine if you had a stack of coins, okay? So here they are, guys. Here are some carbon discs that I've literally, let's see, is this in focus? I'm literally holding a stack of these things together. When you press all the way and you're sewing really quickly, these discs are very compressed. Okay, they're compressed like a tight stack. And then, as you let up pressure and you want to sew more slowly, what's going to happen is they're going to start to separate. Okay, they're going to come further apart. It's kind of hard to simulate here with any consistency, but they're going to get further apart. Okay, and that's going to slow the electricity down. That also creates more heat. So, just like with a rheostat, these foot pedal types, they generate heat for basically the same reason, but just with a different mechanism. Now, one of the problems with dropping one of these is what happens if you drop it and you end up with this. You end up with pieces of carbon wafers, if you will, carbon discs or carbon pile. That's a problem, and that's why you don't want to damage these. If your button style foot pedal is not working properly, it is very possible that that is the reason, and if so, you don't want to keep using it. You're going to have to discard it and replace it either with another button style pedal that works great, and many of them do, or you're going to need to replace it with some other kind of foot pedal. You could use a rheostat or even a new electronic version, which I'll cover in the next video. Now, the two points that you see here are where the cord connects, and I'm gonna loosen these. I want to get the cord out of the way because I want to show you something on the other end of this porcelain. Let's just take it off. These style of foot pedal, they come in different colors. They came in black. They also came in dark brown, light tan. They may have even come in a turquoise at some point in the 50s. And they also came in kind of a swirled tortoiseshell pattern. And the reason is that they were trying to camouflage the foot pedal. Just as with tables, guys, they wanted to camouflage them so you wouldn't see them on their wooden floors, I guess. Now, let me show you this. This is remember I showed you where that plate makes contact with these. Let's zoom in here a little bit. See where when I push down on the button, it pulls this plate toward these copper contacts, and now I have a totally compressed pile of carbon discs. And notice that this little, I call it a butterfly flange, this set of we'll just call it a lever for lack of a better word. It's attached to a spring, okay, and it rests here. Sometimes you'll need to adjust one of these pedals. When I do the video on how to restore one of these, it'll make more sense to you. But notice that I don't have a lot of tension on the discs now, but when I press, see if this is I'm gonna do this where you can see me doing both things. Pretend my thumb is your toe or your foot, and as you press on that pedal, watch what it does. It pulls this piece down like a plunger, and it applies pressure to the disc. If I just do it a little bit, it comes up, and I get slower speed. That's essentially how a carbon pile foot pedal works. Now, people disagree. Some people believe that only electronic foot pedals, which I'll show in the next video, can give you the best slow needle speed, needle control. They certainly can do that much better than a rheostat can, but I have tried, I've come across a lot of vintage sewing machines and foot pedals, and I can tell you that it really depends on how they're tuned and how they were designed and manufactured. Some rheostats are pretty sensitive and give you good control. Others, even if they're running fine, they're in good shape, they've been cleaned, they still are kind of a ham-handed way of getting power to your machine. What I have noticed is that with button style pedals, if the button pedal is adjusted and it's in its proper place of adjustment with the spring, and it has been cleaned, and I'll go over when I open one of these up to service, I'll show you how I clean them. If that's the case, I have found that some of these button style pedals can give me really good needle control, even slow motion control. Now, is it better or as good as an electronic pedal? I think we're probably splitting hairs. I think you could probably make a case either way. I don't want to say for sure because I think it's going to vary. And obviously, singers were engineered to be able to get really good needle control, almost better than any other brand, because they were often used in home economics schools, and you had lots of young sewers just learning to sew. So when I take this apart, and you'll see this in the video I do on restoration, don't be surprised to see Simanco, that stood for, Singer Manufacturing Company. This was, I think Simanco was the name they often put on their parts. See what it says on the back here. This one was made in Great Britain. They made these in the US and in the UK. Singer had factories all over the world. I'll have to do a video on the history of Singer someday. Boy, that'll be a long one. But anyway, you can see it has, the voltage, the amps. It's only 0.7 amps, but Singers were powerful machines, even though their amperage was not high. So now you know how a carbon style foot pedal works. Now, the Necchi company had a carbon pile style, and a few other companies may have tried it, but Singer really made a lot of these and relied on them for many years. And like I say, when you take this apart, the little rubber feet, they kind of fall. They were sitting like this when I took the screws out, and they sat like that. But that's okay, because when you go to put them back in, they're not hard to reassemble. They're quite easy. These are in great shape. I'm rather pleased to see this. But anyway, guys, I wanted to show you the inside of a carbon pile style foot pedal. It's, again, no electronics. This is not from the electronic age, but it was a different way, different from the rheostats in terms of how it allowed you to control the power that went into the machine. And so in the next video, I'm going to talk to you about electronic pedals and how they came into sewing machines in the late 60s, and you can get new generic electronic foot pedals today, and you can use them for your vintage sewing machine, and that'll be the subject of the next video. I hope this was helpful, and again, I will be following up on a video on how to restore and give a tune-up, if you will, to one of these carbon pile foot pedals. These are really the only ones that I do restorations on. If I have a rheostat pedal like the Necky that you saw in the earlier video, I don't restore those, but I find that the carbon piles are they are easier to service. I don't have to deal with things like rivets, and finding parts is very easy. And so I hope you'll stay tuned for the next video where I show how to take one of these apart. Well, you've seen me take it apart, but how to tune it and clean it. And then, but the next video in this series is going to be on the electronic pedals, which are basically what we still use today in new machines. And I appreciate you all watching. Stay tuned for the next installment in the series. Thank you.